Okay, we are recording, and let me just make sure I see it. Okay, we're recording and we're streaming anytime.
Hi, and welcome back to tonight's debate sponsored by The Sun. If you missed the first panel, we'll have this debate up on lowellsun.com later this evening. This is our second panel with 5 candidates. Let me introduce them. Robert Merrill, City Councilor Belanger, Jordan Geis, former City Councilor Joseph Mendonca, and Councilor Edward Kennedy. Gentlemen, good evening. Okay, let's get right into this. The format is 1-minute responses. I have the opportunity to ask a follow-up question if possible. The editorial page editor of The Sun, Dave McCardle, is here with his trusty bell to keep the candidates in line. So anyway, first question goes to you, Mr. Merrill. What's more important to you, a new high school or a new public safety complex?
I believe it.
Hello. Thank you. That's a very good question. I believe it would be a brand new high school due to the fact that people have asked me this before where I think it should be, and I said it should be over at Colley Stadium. And people are backing me up on this project because of the fact that it will alleviate the traffic situation downtown. Also, you get the high school kids walking in through the traffic, and there's a reason for the crosswalks. You know, it has the crosswalk buttons, and they don't even push the buttons. They just walk right in front of the traffic, and if the driver hits them, then the driver gets blamed. But it's not the driver's fault. The kids should, you know, pay attention to the crosswalk. That's what they're made for. So I think it will alleviate the traffic. Also, it would actually be better for public safety downtown.
Okay. Thank you. 1 minute on the nose. Mr. Belanger.
Great question, Tom. Because as you know, the high school is grabbing all the headlines these days. But in essence, the police station is in far worse condition than the high school is. But when it comes down to it, we are talking about our kids and children of the city of Lowell, and they deserve the best. So I'm going to give the nod to the high school. It is of the utmost importance. But the new police station is a 1B, I would say, to a 1A, Tom. Great question. Thank you.
Mr. Geis.
Good evening. I'd like to echo what Councilor Belanger said. The police station is in desperate need of repairs, as is the high school. When my father Joe went there, it was in need of repairs, and when I went there, and I was class 09, it was still in need of repairs. But I think students deserve a modern campus here in Lowell. I think the students come first in the future of the city. We need to be thinking forward, and I believe we're a city of fighters. I think we can have our cake and eat it too. I think we should be examining ways to have both. So, thank you.
Mr. Mendonca.
Yes, I would agree that it's been a while since we've had a renovation at the high school. We have leaks. We need to connect the freshman academy to the rest of the high school. So if we're going to do it in the downtown, it needs a complete renovation to keep it up to par. However, as Councilor Belanger noted, there is an issue with our public safety. Long overdue is to look at how we can improve the situation there and reduce the essentially overcrowding at the JFK Center. Maybe consider moving the Central Fire Station out, leaving space for the police department. That could alleviate some of the issues. So that would be a close second to the high school.
And Councilor Kennedy.
I think the high school has to be the priority. I mean, if we were to pass on the high school right now, we would go to the bottom of the list, the bottom of the queue, and it would be many years before we would be considered by the state for funding for the high school. So for that reason, and also because we need one, I think the high school has to be the priority. I had an opportunity to tour the police station probably 3 months ago with the chief, and there's a lot of deferred maintenance. It needs a lot of work, but I didn't find it to be in dire straits. So, but to answer the question, the high school has to have the priority.
Okay, thank you. Second question goes to you, Councilor Belanger. City residents receive good value on public services?
I believe so. Yes, sir. Hello? Testing. Oh, there we go. Okay, Tom. Yes, and let me start by saying that, the Lowell residential tax rate is among the lowest in the Commonwealth. It is, I know in the last 2 years we had to go up 3.5% and 1.5%, but it is still one of the better values throughout the Commonwealth, and I believe that the residents of the city get a tremendous amount of services for that. There is no charge for trash, and not only that, there's 2 or 3 recycling waste days throughout the city. I think it's a great deal, if you want my honest opinion. However, let's try and remain to keep it that way. And that's nothing we need to put a feather in our cap. Let's just keep the burden on commercial development and to hopefully offset the residential and keep it one of the better values in the Commonwealth. That would be my goal if elected.
You guys.
So I've said throughout my campaign that I want to find ways to hold the line on taxes, and I'd once again echo Councilor Belanger in saying that I think commercial development is the way to do that. The more we can increase revenue through commercial development, the easier the tax burden will be on residential taxes. So I think that's something we need to be looking forward to. I think we also need to look forward to saving the city money where possible, switching to LED lights where possible throughout the city. A lot of cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth as well as the country have done so, and they've seen substantial savings. Every penny we can save is lessening the burden on taxpayers.
Hey, Mr. Mendonca.
It is on. Just to make sure, could you repeat the question again?
Sure.
Make sure I'm answering your question.
Do city residents receive good value in public services for their tax dollars?
And public services, yes. I mean, in the city of Lowell, we have strived to keep taxes down. It has gone up over the last 2 years by 8%. In part because they wanted to address public safety. But I believe that there will be very little you could cut and provide the services that we have at this time.
Kennedy.
Yes, they absolutely do. I think that it's a bargain to live in Lowell. When you consider the services that you get for families that have kids in the school system, it's absolutely the best bang for your buck that you get. I think that in order to maintain that and keep it that way, the City Council should always be vigilant about bringing in new economic development, expanding the tax base, and keeping taxes as low as possible.
And Mr. Merrill.
Hello?
Sure. Do city residents receive good value in public services for their tax dollars?
Okay, that's a good question. My opinion on that is yes and no. The reason being...
What's yes and what's no?
Okay, the tax dollars, yes, and also, again, the tax dollars no, because of the fact that the reason being is because the snow removal, we have multiple issues on these side streets, and when the city calls for a snow emergency, and the tow companies go around and start towing the cars, but yet they don't even go down the streets with the plows. So why are we paying the snow plow removal people to remove the snow when they're not actually out there plowing the street?
Thank you. And okay, so the next question is for you, Mr. Geis. Should police officers wear tasers and wear body cameras?
Well, let me split that up into 2 different parts. I think police officers should have tasers. I think that's something that actually helps them stop from using lethal force. Non-lethal force is very important. I believe there was a gentleman downtown a few months ago that pulled out a knife on officers, and there was a park ranger, I believe, that showed up and had a taser. I believe that if he had not had that taser on and not tased that man would end up getting shot. I believe police officers have a duty to themselves and to their families to take their livelihood seriously and to remain safe, and I think that helps them do so. Body cameras, I don't think we should have body cameras here in Lowell. From a taxpayer point of view, it's $400 per body camera, an extra $89 per month in cloud storage, and they haven't necessarily been proven to work, especially in the case of Eric Garner. I think we need to increase community policing, increase trust between the police department and the community. I think that's the direction we need to take. I don't think the body cameras will be effective.
Okay, Mr. Mendonca.
I think we should try both in the city. They should have the tasers because I prefer non-lethal use, if at all possible, to stop an assailant or a criminal. As far as the body cameras, I know that would be controversial. I believe it would actually protect police from false accusations. and I think it would actually benefit them in the long run. I am concerned about the cost of the cloud storage and would try to find an alternative to that for storing this large amount of video in a more cost-effective way. The budget really can't handle a large expense at this time.
Okay, Councilor Kennedy.
I think that the tasers are a good thing as long as all the police officers are properly trained. As far as the body cameras, I think that that's probably a good idea, and it's good for police officers. It provides them with protection. I mean, everybody's got a camera these days. However, I do think that the cost is way too high. I think that as Mr. Guys pointed out, and as Joe Mendonca pointed out, the cost of storing the information is a real lot of money. And if you're going to collect that information, the cameras are only good if you do store the information. So there's really no getting away from those storage costs. And I think that for right now, it's just too much.
Okay, Mr. Merrill.
Yes. Tasers, yes, and body cameras, most definitely. Reason is because it'll actually protect our officers in a more serious matter, and that way there, if they have to go to court, they'll have the evidence available to them, and that way there's no conflict of interest. Also, tasers, I think, would be a great idea because there's other ways of putting someone down instead of using a straight bullet or whatever they use, but tasers would be better because it'll actually, put them in a paralyzing position for a moment. That way they can get them under control.
Councilor Belanger. Councilor Belanger.
Thank you. Tasers, I'm most certainly in support of. I think it's been far too long. I think it's well overdue here in the city, if you want my honest opinion, for reasons that were stated prior to me without being repetitive. Body cameras, I am very, very cautious on implementing such a measure. I think there's positives and negatives like everything else, but again, the costs that are associated with that. And, I'd like to gauge it from the men and women out in the field who are in the trenches on this. I mean, we haven't heard from them how they feel. I've talked to a few police officers who really sort of leaned against it. But I don't have all the information I would like on that. Right this time I am leaning against it. I think body cameras are better suited for state police, state troopers who are on the road, on the highways, often by themselves without coverage for miles. I think that they're better suited to have that protection for them. A police officer in the city of Lowell often gets back up within a short amount of time. So I think that comes into play there. But, there's still a lot of information I need to have to make a decision. Thank you.
Mr. Guys.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of missing information. What I'm concerned about is privacy. If that becomes public record, then you can go down to the courthouse the next day after the cops enter your neighbor's home and take a look at the video of them entering your neighbor's home and going through your neighbor's home. So there's a lot of questions that are answered before you can make a substantial decision on which way we lean on that.
Actually, just led right into my follow-up question, which is going to be about privacy.
Okay.
Civil liberties. I believe it was Mayor Elliott and maybe one other person in the first panel raised the civil liberties question. Superintendent Taylor has raised the issue of going to someone's house, which was presumed to have a right of privacy within their own walls. How much of a concern is that?
That's a huge concern. That's a huge concern. I'm a big liberty guy, and I think that adds cost too. I think that on the surface, $400 per camera, $89 per month for cloud storage per officer. You're thinking about how many clerks or extra personnel you'd have to hire down at the courthouses to keep track of all this. How long until that's no longer public record? How long do you keep it on file? The costs, I think, would be exponential, and I think that we need to answer those questions before anyone up here, or anyone in the crowd, or anyone on the sitting on the city council can answer that question. So,
Mr. Mendonca.
Yeah, there's certainly some unanswered questions regarding privacy, but in the sense of going to someone's home, it's the same thing as having a search warrant or a probable cause for going in there in the first place. So if they already have that, then some of the things that they might see on the camera may be allowed. If they later determine that they didn't have probable cause, then they would probably squelch the video for the same reasons they would other evidence. But there's a lot of unanswered questions. It's a new area of technology that's being used, and we'll have to grow the procedures for the use of such things.
Councilor Kennedy.
Well, I think it's good to remember that the police officer can turn the camera off and on as he wishes, so that he can use his own discretion, so that there probably would be instances where the police officer would not want the camera on, and that would help protect civil liberties.
Merrill.
Well, that's kind of a tough question, but, you know, at the same time, I feel that, it is okay. You know, it's all right because of the fact that the officers, when they do approach the persons, they, you know, it's mandated that they, you know, say, well, you're being recorded. You know, here's the body camera, you're being recorded. You know, that way they're at least they're informing them before they start speaking. That way you know, there's no harassment orders or no harassment at all, saying, oh, you said this, or you touched me here, or whatever. You know. It's like at least the officers, you know, will be protected as well as the, you know, victims in a certain crime.
Council Belanger.
Well, civil liberties needs to be protected at all costs, and when you talk about going to somebody's home, then in a public area, you're talking a whole different can of worms here. And I think it will lead to more litigation against the city than probably the positive effects it would have on public safety. So that would probably be another black mark why I would not, in the end, I think, support body cameras on offices. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Mendonca, you have the next question. You changed the traffic pattern downtown. There was a little concern at first of what was going to happen. It seems to be pretty effective. What intersection or other area of the city could use some innovative thinking, like changing the traffic pattern?
I think all the intersections in the city right now seem like they're clogged up. But we need to take care of the Rourke Bridge as soon as we're done with the Bridge Street and VFW intersection that's being improved at the moment. And then we really have to evaluate what's holding up the traffic and keeping it from going into downtown. Because although it seems congested in the downtown, it's actually congested beyond the downtown, holding the traffic there. Even Andover and Nesmith Street seem to back up. So that whole Nesmith Street corridor needs to be looked at. So we're going again, I've been advocating for improving our infrastructure, and a lot of that has to do with traffic signaling, getting more coordination in that traffic signaling to move the traffic along. And it needs to move to the outskirts so that the traffic that's in the inner city has some place to go to move up.
Councilor Kennedy.
I think the number one priority has to be the Rourke Bridge, getting a new bridge up in Pawtuckaville. I think that's the number one thing. I think it's going to take a while, but I think that we should really press on that with the state as hard as we can. In terms of the traffic downtown, I think that recently what I've noticed is that there's been a lot more traffic downtown than what there was when we first went to the two-way system. But I do think that maybe some of that is exacerbated by the construction that's going on over on Bridge Street. And also the fact that the bridge on Broadway is one way, and I think that you have people looking for other routes to get to where they're going, and so I do think that probably the two-way traffic is worth a review at some point, but we should at least wait until those other traffic problems have cleared up before we do a review of that.
Okay, Mr. Merrill.
Yes, there's actually a few areas that I would like to announce. Centerville being one of them, because I'm from Centerville. I represent that area. That VFW Bridge is a mess right now. Also downtown, huge traffic congestion. Nesmith and Andover, we almost got hit a couple of times over there, so I know the feeling, and I know the public safety issue over there. And also there is one other place that I have not heard anybody mention yet, which is Couple Square. There's construction going on over there. They are expanding sidewalks and tearing up the grounds, and when they expand the sidewalks, what are they going to do in the wintertime as far as parking goes? Because of the fact that when we get a lot of snow, where are they going to put it all? And plus you got these large sidewalks, how are cars going to drive down the streets when you got snowbanks that are about a mile long out from the sidewalk, you know?
Mr. Belanger.
Thank you. Well, the first I'd like to mention is that, the VFW and Bridge Street improvements that are going on now are really exasperating traffic, and I think in a lot of areas throughout the city, not just that. But that's a step back, but 2 steps forward when it is complete, and that's what it's going to take to correct this problem. Let us not forget the city of Lowell is a cut-through for residents of Drake, Tingsboro, and southern New Hampshire. When I hold signs on Nesmith and Andover, you'd be surprised on the New Hampshire plates you see. We're a cut-through, and it's probably going to continue to get worse as the population grows in the area, and we have to find both immediate and long-term solutions. Now, the road bridge is 10 years away at best, and we need to concentrate on our secondary roads as well. The widening of the roads towards Drum Hill, as well as Nesmith Street. We're working with the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. There will be some improvements to Nesmith Street, Route 38, and the widening of that in the coming future. So slowly, it will get done, but it takes time. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I would concur with Councilor Belanger that we do have a significant amount of traffic problems, and I think that we, especially in regards to VFW and Bridge Street, that we're going to need increased cooperation with the state. For elected November 3rd, the Rourke Bridge would be a #1 priority for me. It's supposed to be a temporary bridge, and as everyone in this room knows, it has not been a temporary bridge. So I think that would be a top priority if I'm elected. That's also going to take a massive amount of cooperation with the state and with the U.S. Department of Transportation. So I think we're going to have to reach out to our partners to get things done.
Okay, next question's for you, Councilor Kennedy. City Council received a report last week about the toll of opiate overdoses in the city. What's the single most important thing the city can do to combat the problem?
I think the single most important thing, I think that the city has done probably the single most important thing that it can do, and that is to put Narcan in all of the public safety vehicles in the city. I think that was a good step, and I think that's already saved several lives. Beyond that, I think what the city really needs to do is work with other communities and with the Commonwealth and be pretty loud that it is a problem. I think that there's a report that came out that said that there were some 47 deaths in Lowell in 2014. Statewide, there were over 1,250. So it's a statewide problem, and more than that, it's a problem in at least 30 other states across the nation. It's a big problem. The state has to come up with funding. We can do certain things, but stuff like treatment beds and other things that would be effective long-term, we really depend on the state to come through on those items. So I think that's an issue that we just have to continue to join with other communities and push the state on.
Hey, Mr. Merrill.
Would you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. The City Council received a report last week about the toll of opiate overdoses in the city this year. What's the most important thing the city can do?
Yes, thank you for that question. Speaking of the toll of deaths, I've actually lost a good friend of mine, and I said he owned a barbershop downtown, Diddy. I don't know if you're all familiar with him, but I said we wound up losing him, so I said, so now I actually started a commission, LYC, that's what I call it, Lowell Youth Commission. I started with his wife, and we're actually going to speak to the youth and get them more involved. Also, I feel that the youth and the security officers, no, not the youth, I'm sorry, the security officers here at the high school should actually have access to Narcan, because you got high school kids that actually come into school high. Also, you don't know what they're doing in the bathrooms. So it's like, in case there is an overdose in the high school, the security will be right there to reverse the effects.
Thank you, Councilor Belanger.
Great question, Tom. This is a crisis, period. There's no other way to describe the situation. It has hit our city very, very hard. Just a few short months ago, we were averaging 2.5 to 3 overdoses per day in the city. New reports show the month of September alone, 4 overdoses a day in our city, and something needs to get done. Recently, as early as last night, I made a motion on the council floor, which was passed unanimously by all my colleagues, to mandate opiate abuse curriculum in the education, not some after-school program, something that's in the curriculum, because that's where it needs to start. It needs to be, we need to go far further than that, but prevention is so important on this issue, because it's far less expensive to prevent opiate addiction than it is to treat an addict years and years down the road. They end up in jail, they destroy families, it destroys communities. It's a nightmare situation that's hitting us very hard, and we need everybody's help, police, fire, elected officials, and I would like to publicly thank the Lowell Sun for their exposure on the issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Geis?
Well, first off, let me commend Councilor Belanger and the City Council for their motion last night. I was present at the City Council meeting, actually, when that took place. I think prevention is key, but I also think that on a municipal level, we need to find ways to weather the storm in the coming years. A lot of folks don't want to hear this, but this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I think we've been seeing that with statistics that we've been reading in the paper. I think we need to take a page out of the book of surrounding cities and towns. I think we need to look at what Gloucester's doing. Gloucester's revolutionized the way we treat addiction. They're not going after the supply, they're going after the demand. That's what we need to do. We need to take a look at what Falmouth did. They send drunk counselors out with their first responders. That way, when a first responder arrives on a scene and administers Narcan, there's someone there to get them into a detox. There's someone there to get them into a bed. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. Success is never final, especially in regards to this. If you're out there, if you're in the crowd or you're listening, you're watching in, I want you to hear these words. From the ashes of tragedy can arise noble purpose. The reason why I decided to run, because I have lost as many of you have. I challenge you all to get involved, reach out to your counselors, reach out to your state reps, give them your input. We're only going to beat this together as a community, as a city, as a family. Thank you.
Mr. Mendonca?
It certainly does appear we have a crisis, and it's not a new crisis. It's been building for a long time, and that report just showed us the detail of it, just how serious it is. Even in tonight's paper, there was a 21-year-old that died from addiction, and there was another one who said it was died unexpectedly, which is often code, not always, but often, for died from an overdose of some kind. So 2 in one day. Obituaries. We certainly need to do more as a city to educate on the dangers of using these opioids. And I don't mean just in the schools, because it's even beyond the schools now. And I think we do need to do both a two-pronged approach to reduce both supply and demand. But we have to rely on other agencies much higher than the city can provide, the state most likely, to provide treatment programs for those addicts that we do save with Narcan that then wish to go into treatment, and that's very difficult to get them to do.
Okay. As a follow-up, I'd like just to ask the panel about Governor Baker's plan, which would allow 3-day commitments and would limit a first-time prescription to 3 days for an opioid. Council.
I think everybody has to get on board with Governor Baker's plan. I think that they see it as a big problem, so I think that we should go ahead with that. I think that, Council Belanger's motion last evening was a good one. I think it's good to get the schools involved. And I think that, Mr. Guy's mentioning Gloucester they're doing a lot of stuff in Gloucester. And one thing that the police chief is doing there is he's putting it on the big pharmaceutical companies. I think that part of the report that came out from the Baker administration was that there was a tremendous amount of prescription drugs that were written. And, we live in a time now where spare parts is a billion-dollar industry. Everybody's getting, new hips, new knees, and so forth. And after you do that, you get a big pile of opiates. And when you run out of those, what do you do then? So, that has to be addressed as well. And I do think that that's a big part of the problem. But the short answer is, I think that we really need to, that every community needs to get behind the governor's program.
Mr. Merrill.
Yes, I was actually reading that in the paper, and I actually stand behind him 100%, because the three-day grace period is good, right? At least it'll actually give them enough time to somewhat get off the effects, and in that meantime, they can actually speak to counselors to find a permanent bed if they're unstable. And also, I say, we may want to go through the court systems if they're unstable, and have them waive their rights and actually give the city leaders the rights, or the hospital the rights to put them in long-term care until they are able to be stable and function well. So, and also I agree on the statement with Jordan Guys. He said that it's a long process and the community has to get involved, and that's where it's going to take it. Thank you.
Council Belanger.
Thank you. I share Robert's opinion. I support the governor's option on this 100%. Absolutely, 72 hours. You should not need them any more than that, except in the need of a major operation. A doctor is just a phone call away, and there's a pharmacy right down the street in most cases. And you know what, the doctors and the prescribers, their fingerprints are on this crisis too, and they need to be held accountable, and Governor Baker's doing that. His office has been the flagship on this fight, and cities of Lowell, what we're trying to do is following his lead. Thank you.
Guys.
So I've made it no secret my admiration for Governor Baker. I was honored to accept his endorsement, and I've been doing everything I can to live up to it. I'm 100% on board with the governor's plan. While civil liberties are important, the sheer magnitude of this problem is, I think, unlike anything we've ever at least seen in my lifetime. We have a long way to go, and I think a lot of the governor's programs are going to take years to take into effect. We got to find ways to weather the storm here at a municipal level. And I think we made a lot of progress, and as I said, I commend the city council, but I think having me on there, someone who's experienced it firsthand, someone who's seen it tear apart my generation, would be greatly beneficial. Thank you.
Mr. Mendonca.
Yeah, I agree we need to limit the availability, again, address the supply side of the equation. Overall, I support the governor's recommendation. However, I'm not so sure that the arbitrary 3-day supply is necessarily the right answer. I'm not a doctor or a patient, for that matter, at this time, but probably no more than a week. But it all depends on how long it's going to take to address the pain of some surgery or whatnot. So 3 to 5 days, maybe not just 3. But people smarter than I could probably figure that out.
Thank you. We're going to have time for one more question before we get into closing statements. Mr. Merrill, you get the honor for this one.
Thank you.
Superintendent Taylor's proposed a new policy on licensing handguns. Do you favor a plan that's more restrictive than what he has, less restrictive, or does the chief have it right?
Well, that is a tough question because of the fact that it's one of the amendments. It's the second amendment on the U.S. Constitution. Now, now let me ask you this, and the current council, because I'd like to hear their input about it too. What about our veterans? They have the right to bear arms because they actually fought in our country, right? So I feel like they're penalizing our veterans as well as our government officials who actually have the right to carry guns. So why should they make it more tougher for people who have the smarts to carry guns?
Councilor Belanger.
Thank you, Tom. I'm not a big fan of guns on a personal level, but nonetheless, people have a right to own them. And I thank Superintendent Taylor for even looking at this, because he could simply close the door and not even be open to this option, because it's his decision. And he's being very amenable in that regard. But we have stories of a veteran who flew F-16s for a living and couldn't get a gun license in Lowell, and there's basically something wrong with that. So it does need to be loosened up. At the same time, I don't want to make this easy. I want to make sure those people who have guns are qualified, they don't abuse drugs and alcohol, and that are law-abiding citizens that should be carrying weapons to ensure that those others that don't obey the law don't get access to these guns. But I am a proponent of training. For sure, that definitely we had an incident on Liberty Street where a store owner was robbed. He was he held a gun. It was legal. He did have a permit to carry, but nonetheless he came out and fired openly at a suspect and went into a residential home. That individual lacked training. So that's where I stand, and training has to be mandated in there. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Geis.
Well, I also think training is important. I do have some discrepancies with the recent set of gun laws, but I do commend William Taylor for taking another look at a 3-decade-old set of gun laws. But while we do need to limit who can receive gun ownership, there are some discrepancies I have, such as a letter of recommendation. I think there are a lot of unanswered questions who the letter of recommendation comes from an unrestricted LTC. The only way you can get an unrestricted LTC if this goes through is if you are former military personnel or current active duty, you are a former or current police officer, or if you have a letter of recommendation. There's a lot of unanswered questions. I've talked to a lot of gun advocates in the city as well as a lot of anti-gun advocates in the city, and I think they all have questions. I think he needs to go back to the drawing board. I think we need to find more common ground.
Okay. Former Councilman Mendonca.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it is the right to bear arms. and I think we need to make it slightly less restrictive. They've come a long way in making it that way. I agree with the training requirement. Whoever has a gun should know how to operate it and how to maintain it. However, overall, I don't believe the criminals are applying for a license to carry. So the people that are actually applying are law-abiding citizens that should be vetted to make sure there's nothing in their background that would preclude them from having it, but otherwise they should be granted the right to own a gun.
And Councilor Kennedy.
I think the chief has it about right. I think that basically what he did was to loosen up the policy a little bit by putting in a lot more training. I think that one of the things that people were upset about was that training is expensive. And maybe a second thing was that I don't think that there was a lot of input from the public, so that when people came down to the council meeting a few weeks ago and wanted to open up the issue again, I thought that was a good thing, but I almost think that it's more an issue of educating those people rather than getting the chief to change the policy. And I do think it's worth pointing out that that policy is the chief's prerogative. The city council really can't mandate for him to do one thing or another. But the short answer, again, is I think the chief has it just about right. And if he comes back and there are no changes, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Hey, thank you, everybody. We're going to go into the closing statements, and as we take the rotation, Councilor Belanger, you're going to get the first chance. So I ask you to look into the camera and tell voters why they should vote for you on November 3.
Thank you. I am current City Councilor Corey Belanger, and I am asking the voters of the City of Lowell for your continued support. I have been extremely vocal on economic development here in the City of Lowell, jump-starting the Hamilton Canal project. I have been a fierce advocate for more police officers on the street. By calendar year 15, you will see 13 new police officers on the street in my first term. We have fought very hard for education, meeting net school spending, and adding pre-K classes to the curriculum. So I'm asking for your vote here tonight so we may continue the momentum here in Lowell. That is Corey Belanger, number 1 on your ballot. Thank you very much.
Mr. Geis.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First off, let me thank Lowell Sun for organizing this, as well as everyone for coming out, and those of you folks that are watching from home. My name is Jordan John Geis. I'm a candidate for Lowell City Council, number 10 on the ballot. I was born and raised here in Lowell, as was my father, Joe Geis, and his father before him came over here from Poland when he was 7. I intend to live here for the rest of my life. I intend to raise a family here someday. I think we've come a long way over the past couple of years, but as I said before, I don't believe success is ever final. I think we have a long way to go. I lost my cousin Zachary Geis to an opiate overdose a couple of years back, and it's what spurred me to run for office. I think we have a long way to go in regards to that, and as I said, I don't think we've made a lot of progress, but if elected November 3rd, I intend to tackle that problem head on. Thank you.
Mendonca.
Yes, I'm Joe Mendonca. I've served on City Council for 7 years, well, 4 years, and before that I served on School Committee for 7 years. My strengths have always been in finances and the budget and analyzing the budget, and I do hope that you will return me to the council. My priorities going forward, as they generally have been in the past, is to improve the city's infrastructure, paving our roads, improving our sidewalks, making sure we have proper public safety coverage, and our fire stations are kept open, and that we provide the proper funding in order that our education system can succeed in educating our youngsters. So on November 3rd, I do hope that you'll consider me for one of your 9 votes. Look for the name Joseph Mendonca on the ballot. Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
Hi, my name is Ed Kennedy. I've been on the City Council since 2012. I'm running for a 3rd term. I think I probably should point out that I was also on the City Council in the late 70s and to the middle 80s for 4 terms. And so I bring probably a unique historical perspective to the council that maybe otherwise that nobody else can. I've lived in Lowell for my entire life. I've raised my family here. My 2 children went to Lowell schools through grade 12. I have a master's degree in public administration, and I'm interested in serving for another term. So I would ask you to consider Ed Kennedy, number 3 on the ballot on November 3rd. Thank you very much, and I'd just like to thank Lowell Sun for putting this on. I think this is all of these are worthwhile events to have, and I think that it's important to inform the voters about who the candidates are and what they stand for. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merrill, you get the last word.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you, Lowell Sun. Thank you for the rest of the group here tonight for coming out at this debate. I just want to thank everyone for, tuning in live stream. Also, I would like to inform you that I am not just a number. My name is Robert Merrill, and I am a candidate, and I would like to represent you for the next 2 years coming up on November 3rd. So I humbly ask for your support on November 3rd. Let's make this happen, folks. Thank you.
Candidates, thank you very much. Once again, candidates on this panel: Robert Merrill, City Councilor for Belanger; Jordan Geis, former City Councilor Joe Mendonca, and current Councilor Ed Kennedy. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We're going to take a few-minute breaks at the third panel. Election is November 3.